I would begin this meeting by asking for a roll call. I don't have a list of the members present, but I guess the members present, if they could announce themselves for the record.
I'm here, Chris Jones.
Joanne Pyland Othello.
Bianca Brewster.
Wonderful. The next item on the agenda would be approval of the minutes. John, I have failed to receive a copy of the minutes. I don't know if they can be circulated now, or if people have been given advance notice of the minutes from our last meeting.
Mr. Chair, I just sent them. Let me verify. I just sent them at 12:05.
I see.
Via email, but I can display them if you want.
Okay.
Or I'm going to try and display them. Let me see if I can get this.
Well, if you can't, that's not a problem.
Here we go. Let's try this.
Perfect. I've got it.
And if I need to scroll down, please let me know.
Thank you, John. Okay, unless anyone needs more time, I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes from the March 3rd, 2021 meeting.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the March 3rd, 2021 meeting.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. The next item on the agenda, let me bring this up. The next item on the agenda it would be any report on citizens' communications. Do we have anything on that, Mr. Porter?
I do not think we have any citizens on the WebEx.
Okay. The next item then would be item number 5, discussion and possible action on recommended changes to the hazardous materials ordinance to implement distance requirements from schools, as well as to develop a recommendation on a distance requirement from industrial zones for future school siting.
Mr. Chair, we have some representatives from utilities, so I asked if the committee would consider maybe taking item 6 first, and then we could return to 5.
Not a problem. Since they're ready, we're discussion on 6.
Okay, so I have turn off this. There we go. So I have the utilities director Arturo Garcia and the assistant utilities director Mike Rogers. And at the last council meeting, I believe it was the last council meeting, there was a motion made to have the SEAC review the, I guess the SEAC has already reviewed the xeriscaping ordinance that they had passed SEAC with, working with utilities on coming up with a incentive program to have industrial sites use more xeriscaping. And so I guess I'll turn this over to Mr. Garcia or Mr. Rogers.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation to this meeting. And as far as the xeriscaping ordinance incentives, the position is, I know it's going to drop our revenues, and it's one matter of them conserving water and minimizing the overflow from irrigation systems. I think that's a benefit. I would need to see what kind of considerations you're wanting to create as far as incentives to promote it. And I can look at what we've done in the past, and I would have to defer to Mr. Rogers to see if he's familiar with what we've done in the past. Mike, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, no, we have no incentive program in place. I think we have discussed possible different rates for irrigation meters. The biggest incentive is for people to do something is usually money. So when irrigation water is relatively, our water prices are relatively cheap. So that's something I guess we could research.
One item that I know that we've done in the past, as far as if they have a current irrigation system and they want to go to xeriscaping and reduce the amount of water that they're using, we may be able to give them a credit of some sort, but I need to evaluate how it's going to affect our fees and revenue.
And Mr. Garcia, I have a question, sir.
Yes.
When you mention some sort of incentive, this is on the water bill itself, or you're talking about some other type of incentive?
Well, what I would do is set up some sort of program for these existing irrigation systems that are maybe wasting too much water to help us conserve water. And that way, if they do something and reduce it to where they use different methods of irrigating, bubbler systems instead of these spray heads,
Sure.
and where it, whatever they spent, we can give them a credit on their bill, but it's not a monetary payment. It's just a credit on their bill for maybe the past history, maybe go back a month, 2 months worth of consumption that they did, where now they're going to use less flow, but they're not going to be pouring water out into the street like in some cases that we've seen. But what I'd like to see is be able to get these irrigators that are just wasting water to conserve it. And if they do that effort, maybe reward them in some way. But I need to see how it impacts our revenue flow, because it is going to affect our revenue. So I need to balance it with what they're doing to save water, at the same time make sure we're having a good cash flow, because we still need to maintain and operate our system. So that's something that I'm thinking of.
It's also, it's a complicated problem in that some of these large industrial sites, they big warehouses where they like to landscape the outside, but the internal domestic water use is very low. So you have these big sites and we have low water usage. It means the water is being stale. So we could come up with some people doing xeriscaping, and then in order to keep the water fresh, we're going to end up having to flush it down the drain. So we have one side, we have to have these large lines for fire hydrants and stuff. We have these industrial parks that have very low domestic use. The irrigation, in a way, helps us not flush to keep the freshness in the water. I mean, it's a complicated, you have to look at these areas, and there's multiple layers there. We would probably get them to xeriscape, and then the next thing you know, we're going to be flushing water down the storm drain to keep it fresh.
And currently, as things are, how often does that have to happen in these industrial areas? And I'm imagining you're talking about these warehouse districts and things of that nature. Is that really what we're talking about here?
Yes, things like the Mines Road, large area. We have a few residential spots, but by the time you get out to Mines Road, several of those, I believe Black Diamond is one, where we have to have flushers out there.
And how often does that happen? The flushing of these lines for to get rid of the stale water.
Well, it depends on the site, but it happens daily. 1 or 2 times a day. Sometimes we've had some of them operate, every 2 hours.
Yeah, they depending on the chlorine residual and the water quality issue, they can be almost every 2 hours. But also, if we get a water quality issue or concern, they go out there and flush it for 15 minutes, to eliminate some of the issues that they have.
And Art and Mike, if I may, I mean, are you? You mentioned maybe some sort of incentive, but I didn't get the impression that this had to be retroactive from council, maybe just on new development, but maybe I didn't interpret that correctly.
That's true. It could be just on the new stuff, but at the same time, one of the biggest complaints that we're getting from Public Works is the overspray. And if we can fix the problem with overspray, that helps us because it prolongs the life of the street, which, the streets are deteriorating. So I'd want to see like a benefit to everyone, not just the new development, but because everybody's going to be saying, how come he's getting incentives and we're not giving us anything? Because we'd like for them to fix their systems, especially the ones that are oversprayed. I don't know if you've seen that situation.
What is it? I'm sorry. What is it cost for them to get an irrigation, like for businesses?
A typical irrigation tap will cost you anywhere from the smallest system would be maybe about 800, and more complex systems just the tap itself can cost like $2,000 just for the installation of the backflow and the meter itself, the tap. That doesn't include the layout of the system because those will vary based on the layout and how many zones they have.
Okay, thank you.
Just to wonder why counting. Just a question. So with new development, would it be possible to not mandate or perhaps encourage? I don't know if mandate is too strong a word. I think you use the word bubbler systems for new developments of warehousing areas so that they wouldn't put the sprinkler head. I'm not sure what they're using now, but for future warehouse development, could there be something in place where they would have to provide bubbler systems and just make it a little bit more environmentally friendly as you're trying to avoid that overspray? Would that be a consideration for us?
I would agree with that. I think it's something that can be strengthened to where I believe it's already being addressed, but I think it would be a strong point to bring up to eliminate the problem of overspray. But it's a good point to address.
Does anyone have any further questions for these gentlemen? Well, with that, gentlemen, I really appreciate you all showing up to make this presentation to us. I'm sure we'll be hearing from you in the short future, and I think this is a subject that certainly deserves our attention and consideration. So I thank you all for being here with us today and for the information that you all have provided. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we'll go ahead and provide you more information later in your later meetings as we compile and see what is it that we can offer here to assist you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Garcia.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
With that, we would be moving to the next item on our agenda, which would be item number 5, discussion and possible action on recommended changes to the hazardous materials ordinance regarding schools.
So, Mr. Chair, we on the last meeting we briefly went over it, and I think the committee wanted to do some independent research on it, and try and figure out what would be an acceptable distance. And I know that Joanne had emailed me some items, and it looks like she's done some research.
Well, I have tried to, but I commend anyone who works with hazardous materials. It is such a complicated issue, and I don't know, I don't feel very educated on it. I tried to read up on it. Also sent you something that Trisha Cortez emailed me, John. Did you happen? I know it was kind of late. She sent it this morning. Only because we've been trying to work with UISD, especially with Muller Elementary being so much in the industrial area, and as Trisha mentioned, Cortez with Rio Grande International Study Center. There's more schools that are, I think, going to be built. So I think this is such a timely item for our agenda and a very important item. There is a map. John, I wish you could show this map. Did you happen to see the email? Did I send the email with the map of the industrial?
You did, I think, and I'll forward it to the rest of the committee.
Right.
Let me pull that
It's
up.
interesting because it speaks to 200. Go ahead. We can address.
So let me make sure I find the right. Here we go. So this was a map, I think that, yeah, this was an item that we talked about a couple of years ago. And at that time, they had requested that a 2-mile radius be drawn. So let me share that just a second. Is this the map you're referring to?
Yes, John, that's good.
Okay.
Can it be enlarged or just too small for me? Okay, thank you. Well, as you can see, and at the top, I'm not sure, John, does it say 249 sites out of 600 something? Yeah. And that's within the 2 miles of Muller. And that's sort of scary. Now, granted, those have already happened. And I know that according to the Hazardous Materials Ordinance, I know people are in place to monitor. I think I read that you have to get a permit every year. So I know the city probably has a handle, or I would hope has a handle on. That is a huge, I'm overwhelmed by that picture and overwhelmed by what it would require to just continue enforcement of this. Can you speak to that at all, John? How is enforcement done on that?
Yeah, so if they handle hazardous material, they need to get a permit, and so they need to renew it yearly.
Right.
And then they have to keep their inventories up to date. It's all online. But then our inspectors go out and they also have to have a site plan. And then so our inspectors go out and they use that inventory to cross-reference what they actually have in their warehouses, and then they check for condition of the drums and the packages, and to make sure that it's being stored safely. And then they go out. We try at a minimum to hit each warehouse at least 4 times a year, but we'll hit them more than that if there's any issues. You kind of know. There are some companies that are very, very, very good at storage and compliance, and then there are companies that I don't want to say are deficient. We have issued some citations, but usually it's not keeping up with their inventory or their site plan, those type of things. But we'll go and inspect those areas or those warehouses more often. So I think we've got a pretty good, at least in terms of inspection, a pretty good inspection schedule, and this is not, and when I say schedule, I don't mean that, if we're going to go and inspect on a particular day that quarter. It is somewhat random, because we want to make sure that they're complying. But yeah, again, we try and hit each warehouse at least 4 times a year.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, with this 2-mile radius, I mean, that is a lot, and obviously that would make sense because the bulk of the development in this area it is industrial. And I think in terms of site distance requirements from schools, I think 2 miles is probably not a equitable or a reasonable site distance. SOBs and sexually oriented businesses aren't 2 miles. So I think 2 miles is a bit excessive. And that's just my opinion to the committee.
I happen to have some information about a builder. I'm not able to disclose who gave it to me, but I've been trying to research with National Home Builders Association just to get some idea. Some of the builders do have 2,000 square feet. They cannot build within a 2,000 square feet radius of a known hazardous chemical, and that's half a mile, so that seems very small again. The other thing that I guess for the purpose of this conversation is, I think it would be wise to work with UISD since they are the ones who would be building schools here, and maybe get some feedback from them as well. But I don't know. I'm concerned because, for example, Green Ranch, those who aren't familiar with the residential properties out here, let me just share, there's Wolf Creek, Green Ranch, La Bota, to name a few. And they only have one entrance and one exit. And I think a lot of this conversation has come about for years because of that very concern. Should there be a problem with a hazardous chemical that, some reason there's an accident or whatever. And of course there is a school, and that's what concerned many people. And as we go into and more schools are built, we must be cognizant these children would, they have to be able to get out. Residents have to be able to get out. We have to have the necessary people coming in. So it's quite a complicated issue. So that's my feedback on that. I also, through Trish Cortez, because she does this research on a regular basis, and I depend on her for her research. In that email, John, she mentioned there are plants located within the Mines Road Industrial Zone like Medline / Midwest Sterilization that are releasing significant carcinogenic emissions into the atmosphere, ethylene oxide. And Laredo's plant is the 3rd largest emitter in the country.
Yeah, and I under our permit, we have to inspect. I think it's Title 3, and so I think that shows that facility, and it shows I want to say another facility out in the Unitech area, but that Medline, I think that those numbers are coming from or being reported from the national branch of that, because they don't actually do the processing there.
It may be.
Yeah. And so I was surprised too when I was looking at the air quality, and then we go to inspect, and that doesn't fall under, by the way, that doesn't fall under the hazmat permit because they're not storing that there.
Okay.
And so I'm thinking that those numbers and I think Tricia got that from the Title 3 is probably the national emissions from that company.
I see. Good to know.
And I think for purposes of our discussion, I think it may be useful to differentiate between, locations that store hazardous materials as opposed to locations that actually, emit some sort of hazardous material, because, where hazardous materials are stored, well, there's potentiality for some dangerous condition to arise. Usually it doesn't. As opposed to, the situation that you just described, Miss Beeland, where there's some place that's, actively putting out something noxious on a daily basis. I think it may be useful to differentiate between those two different types of sites because I see that there may be a potential problem since Laredo has warehouses and warehouses that are licensed to house hazardous material everywhere. And so, I'm afraid that if we bite off more than we can chew, we'll end up with something that's really something of a blunt instrument that's maybe not so useful and keeping, as far as keeping children safe and allowing us places to build schools, which we apparently need to do all the time. But I just wanted to put that out there.
That's a good point.
Yeah, if I may add to that, I completely agree with that. I mean, I think Tricia did a nice presentation, and I agree with some of the things that she talks about. But yeah, just for the committee's information, when we're talking about EPA, they regulate pollution, they regulate emissions, they regulate hazardous waste. Hazardous waste, emissions, and pollution is not the same thing as hazardous materials. Hazardous materials is regulated by the city, obviously, but is regulated by the Department of Transportation. And so under federal and under state and even under city law, there's a clear difference between those chemicals.
Just a suggestion, and I just want to add one last thought. Listening to you talk about the enforcement side of things 4 times a year and maybe more and so forth, it's such a daunting task to try to keep up with all of these sites. I can't even imagine the volume of work that's required. But if we do decide on a distance, perhaps as a committee, I definitely think for future development, it should be considered at least a mile to give. I'm even nervous about that. I realize there's already places that store hazardous materials. This is a very difficult task that we are faced with because I don't feel like I'm very knowledgeable. I'm just beginning to research more on this, but I'm just concerned about the poor traffic flow that we have right now. And I know in 2 years, we're supposed to get a connector, but in the meantime, there is a school that's going to get started. Construction will start. So we have this ability as a committee to make a recommendation. And I just think we should really give this a couple.
Yeah, I agree. And I know that part of this motion was to talk about site planning for the schools. The problem is that's a separate governmental entity. And so the city really doesn't have the ability to tell schools where they can and cannot be. And, I think everybody sees the issues with that. If you drive down any east-west major connector, and I'll use Del Mar, for example, they've got schools on Del Mar, and people rely on Del Mar to either get to Loop 20 or to 35, and you've got, 3 or 4 school zones that slow down traffic in the morning and slow down traffic in the afternoon. And I think we all realize that those probably were not good site locations for schools. Ideally you would want the schools in the neighborhoods, but when you have major connectors that people rely on to traverse the city, that's not good planning. And the reason why that's not good planning is because we don't have the ability to tell them where they can or cannot build. What happens is a landowner says, I'll donate this land for a school, and that's where UISD or LISD builds it. So we are very limited in that.
Excellent.
Does anyone have any further comment on this issue for now? This is certainly something that we need to obviously look into and really research so that we can come up with something, truly useful. I would expect we'd be talking about this in coming meetings, but for purposes of today's discussion, does anyone have anything else to add to this discussion? Okay. I'll assume that we'll be moving on. Having that said, the next item on the agenda would be item number 7, discussion of litter issues along Kilim Industrial Boulevard. Does someone have something to present?
Well, I've been trying to get American Martinez to go for a ride with me, but I haven't succeeded. Maybe it's afternoon.
I do know on this issue, and John, you may want to speak to it as well, but I do know that the city had either cleaned up this area or was going to hire a contractor to clean up this area. So
Yes.
my understanding, I think you sent me an email. I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, but
Yeah.
you said it proved correct.
Do you have the ability to share the pictures with them? I hate to bother you, but that way they can see that it looks so much better. And I would like the committee to see the fruits of someone's labor.
Let me find it just a second.
I pretty much emailed John a lot, looks like.
And I'll forward all these to the other committee members.
Okay.
See if I can share that.
And while searching for that, I can tell you we left them. Okay, here they come. Okay, great, John. Thank you. So we took off early. I guess it was yesterday, and parked ourselves alongside of the road and wanted to see what it looked like. And so I sent John these pictures, and what I noticed, or what my husband and I observed, is that we couldn't see any drivers. So it's like, I think John or someone had mentioned before, they're actually pulling over and resting because we probably don't have enough resting areas for these truck drivers. So if you can continue down with the pictures, I mean, some of them are all, I did get a beautiful picture of a crested katakata. Hey, where's Bianca? Is that a crested katakata? Am I saying that right? Do you know what that eagle looks like? Can you go down, John?
Keep going. Okay.
Yeah, keep going. I want to get to the eagle. Let me get to the eagle and we'll come back up. Let's see. I was so excited, as you can see further, some trucks, and there's the trash. That's kind of along the fence line. There it is. And I don't think it's a bald eagle, but Bianca, I know you're. It's what?
Yeah, it's a character. Yeah, cara.
It is.
Katakata.
Yeah, so I thought, hey, we get some good stuff around here too. But notice it's sad because there's trash. But I will say in my email to John, I didn't see any jugs of liquid that used to be what we thought looked like urine. But I'm just saying they appeared to be. But you can see there's still trash. And I know wind causes some of that. You'll also notice, as John mentioned before, it appears the Kilims are opening or getting some clearing done for future development. But that's the update I could provide on litter issues along Kilim. They're there, but somebody did a very good job cleaning it, so kudos. I know you'd be thinking, wait a minute, there's litter, but no, it used to be much, much worse. So this is a thumbs up, much better.
It's great.
Yeah, and forgive me, I just don't know if that was Public Works or if a contractor did that.
Yeah, okay.
Wonderful. Mr. Porter, the item number 8 on this agenda, it calls for a discussion of items for next meeting. I don't know if you have anything to add or anyone has anything to add on item number 8.
I think we'll bring the previous 2 items back, the xeriscaping, and then the hazmat distance requirements.
Definitely. Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, if no one has anything further, I would move on to the next, would be adjournment. I'd make a motion to adjourn this meeting until our next regular meeting.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Okay. With that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Okay. Y'all have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you all again here very soon. Mr. Porter.